we need to open up the African sports ecosystem. We need to bring in a lot of players, and that's what data does. Data would open it up. People in the African sports sector need to start finding more creative ways to generate revenue, to generate a lot of revenue. The classic thing to say is for the government to invest in it, but the government needs to see that it is a revenue generating thing. Right? Africa needs to continuously export talent. Like, we need it, right? And the issue is we need to now get the right value from that talent. You see that if you look at the charts between South America and Africa, we export similar amount of players. But if you look at the value, South American players altogether, they go for over $700 million. Africa is less than $100 million.
Today's guest, co-founder and CEO of Afriskaut, Nnamdi Emefo. Welcome to the pod.
Hey, hello, Gideon. Thank you. I'm so gassed to be here, man.
Tell us about Afriskaut. What does the product do? Who is it for? And what's the main problem you're helping solve?
Well, for Afriskauts, we are a scouting platform, right? We grant access to scouts, football clubs, and agents around the world. So we give them access to performance and bio data on the best footballers on the continent.
I want to talk about your early days. You started out in electrical engineering and then made the shift into software. One, what led to that decision? And how did you pick up the technical skills?
So basically, what led to that decision was actually Afriskauts, right? So there was a point where the pain of the problem, something had to be done about it, right? And this can be linked to my co-founder. Uh, I've known my co-founder since we were in high school. So basically, he was so good that I believed he could go professional, right? I believe that he could. I believe that he could really be the one to, make us rich, right? But due to lack of opportunities and lack of no data, right, he was not able to achieve that. So when that realization dawned on me that the only reason why this guy did not go professional was because no one was able to look at him. So for me, that was enough motivation to pick up technical skills in order to build Afriskaut.
Were you also juggling a job in electrical engineering at the time?
No, I was juggling other jobs in software. So I started performing a bit too badly in electrical engineering because I was spending all of my time learning how to code, right? So, but yeah, in the end of the day, uh, to some extent, I think I'm quite pleased with the outcome.
On the topic of careers, you've spent a chunk of yours in the fintech space, going from Bankly, that is a fintech product. Then you went on to join OurPass, that is an SME banking platform. And then you were later on at IDT, that is a payments provider. Given your background, why not build in fintech? Why build in sports?
I joined tech to play in the sports area, right? But as you know, over the past 10, 15 years, fintech has been the key player. Fintech has been the key industry in tech in Africa, right? That's where we've seen the most evolution, at least on the African continent, right? So of course, for me to be able to generate the funds I needed to keep growing my startup, I needed to be an active player in the most, in the best workspace for software engineers, And at the time, that was fintech. Fintech offered the best growth plan, right? So that was the strategy around it.
Sports scouting in Africa is heavily still dependent on personal connections, and corruption still remains rampant in the space. One, how are you going about modernizing these outdated processes? And secondly, have you faced any resistance from the status quo that kind of benefits from the old way of doing things?
Yeah, amazing questions. So in terms of modernizing how it is right now, I think it's so important for it's so important for you to be able to convey your vision, right, to the African teams, to the African leagues, right? So it's basically being able to ensure that they are able to see that this thing would bring value to them. So I think that's the first thing you have to do, and it links to the second one, the second question you're asking. If you're able to convey your message to them in a way that they see that they could benefit from this. So how I see it is when you're speaking with someone else, you need to constantly think about how would this person see value in what I'm telling them, right? Don't come and say, "Oh, this is what I, don't come and say this is what I would this is what I would do or what I would gain." You need to speak for them in terms of what do the African team stand to gain? They stand to gain more recognition, right? And you heavily subsidize it in a way that there is opportunity for adoption. You know, with these players, we are not trying to we're not trying to kind of replace agents or replace these people. In fact, we are seeing a lot of adoption from agents on Afriskauts. In fact, I would say agents are the majority of our users, because here's the thing: is agents, they want you to recommend players to them, right? So Afriscout is not we're like an enabler of the market, right? It's not like we're trying to Yes, it's not like we're trying to hog everything. It's like we're enabling the market. We need to open up the African sports ecosystem. We need to bring in a lot of players, right? And data is and that's what data does. Data would open it up. We're talking about even player financing to getting players on trials. There are so many industries that can come with this. We're not even speaking of data for fan engagements. So there's so much we can still do around the ecosystem of sports aside just scouting.
Okay. You've mentioned that it took years to build AfriScout, and I'm curious what that process looked like. Did you spend any time validating the problem before diving in, or did you have enough personal conviction to be like, yeah, we need to go all in on this?
I think it's the latter. I think I had more possible conviction, right? So yeah, 'cause at the time we're really annoyed at the whole thing.
We're seeing more and more African talent heading abroad, and this can lead to our local leagues struggling to mature. How can Africa balance both exporting talent while also developing strong leagues at home?
You see, that question is like it the way it comes is like it answers itself. I'll tell you how. Africa needs to continuously export talent. Like we need it, right? And the issue is we need to now get the right value from that talent, right? You see that if you look at the charts between South America and Africa, we export similar amount of players. Like it could be like just a 300 count difference between 2,700 and like 2,400. We export a large amount of players. But if you look at the value, right? South American players altogether, they go for over $700 million. Africa is less than $100 million. So we also have a value problem that we need to solve. Now, when we solve that value problem and we're actually getting big bucks into the continent, we can now use that money to keep investing in the local leagues, right? So that's where good sports administration comes in. When you do get $1 million, what do you then do with it to ensure that you keep producing players like that and producing more and more and more, then connecting them to the fan base, to creating a proper team around it? Do you see that? So we need to raise that revenue and use the revenue wisely.
I like that you've mentioned value, and I want to tie this into my next question. We often hear about exploitation in the music industry. Artists give up their masters for pennies on the dollar. Do you think there's enough protection for African talent in sports? What do you think needs to be done to kind of help prevent the exploitation of talent?
I don't think there's enough protection. Yeah, from what I've seen so far, I don't think there's enough protection, and I think that's from a moral standpoint is one of the things that the Afriskaut is looking to change and be different about in terms of ensuring that African players are not exploited. You see, even personally, on my one of my co-founders is Ebi, right? Ebi Emenike, and I actually met her by reading a book, right? The name of the book was called The Lost Boys, right? And in this book, uh, the author explains how people come into Africa, right, and take up African players, exploit them, and use them for like sex trafficking and stuff like that. Like there is a whole underworld about that, right? So while I was reading the book, the author kept reaching out to a particular agent for advice against these issues, and that was my co-founder. So when I kept seeing her name, I reached out to her on LinkedIn because I wanted to ensure that that particular culture of trying to protect the African talent is being from the get-go being put into the culture of Afriskauts. So actually, yeah, amazing question, and it's something that I really, really deeply care about.
Other than the private sector, do you see government playing any part in curbing exploitation?
Uh, of course, of course, there's always a chance for good policy. There's always a chance for good policy across board. So yes, I'd say yes.
Earlier on, you touched on money management. Now, clubs are spending millions every year on African talent, but the local economies don't seem to feel the benefits, right? There is no trickle down effects. Now, my question to you is there a model that exists or could exist where more of that money could go back to the community and developing more talent?
Of course, just like I previously mentioned, again, the talent has to go for the right price. So we need to this model that you speak of, right? It's more of like a trust factor, you know. It's like, why should Real Madrid come and pay $10 million for a player on the continent? That's We want to see more of that. That's the kind of news that we want to see. Now, in terms of that money, when it then comes in, it can be now be rightfully channeled to the communities, right? But at the moment, I don't particularly think there is enough coming in, right? And yes, at the grassroots level, it's not it needs more and more investment, right? And one of the one of the best ways right now to raise that revenue required is to export proper talent and use the money wisely. Uh, the classic thing to say is for the government to invest in it, but the government needs to see that it is a revenue generating thing, right? So for me, that's really it. Uh, People in the African sports sector needs to we need to start finding more creative ways to generate revenue, uh, to generate a lot of revenue.
And so, are you looking at initial revenue as a kind of proof of concept?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, of course, of course, of course. Sports is a $1 billion industry, and we don't s- we don't say that because of it. It's sports. We say that because it's actually generating that.
I did some digging and came across a single product that you're building, the Manja app. Now, Manja seems more focused on African football match data, while AfriScout is serving the talent discovery on like a global scale. How are you balancing building the two, and are there any synergies between the two platforms?
Okay. So manager is for team analysis, right? So we didn't only care about just scouting the players, because we understand that the players have to be well coached. The team has to be well coached. in order to create really good talents. So it was important for us to also create a software that doubles down on team performance, right? So in terms of how we are balancing both of them, I mean it's not easy, right? But I think to a large extent, manager is really stable and it's having a life of its own. So I think at the moment we're managing it quite well.
Does one product act as a lead magnet for the other?
Yeah, some of our users are on both, right? And we do see a possibility for even cross-selling, and not just cross-selling. Maybe at some points it's going to be one platform, you know.
Now, Afriskaut was selected for the NBA Accelerator. Congratulations on that. Any plans to expand into other sports?
Definitely, definitely, definitely. The idea is to the basketball, definitely, right? Basketball, definitely. But the idea is at the end of the day to be the number one talent recruitment on the global south.
Any plans for track and field in the future? I happen to be Kenyan, and on this side, we like to run.
You guys are amazing. Congrats from the Olympics. You guys are amazing.
Beyond scouting, do you see AfriScout getting involved in local sport leagues and more of grassroots programs?
Of course, of course, and even in Nigeria now, we have joined the government in producing a cup, the Afriskaut NLO Cup. The idea is to create a benchmark for youth talent in the country, where to play in that particular tournament, we select the best of the best, right? Yeah.
How does AfriScout make money? What is your business model?
So at the moment, we charge to use the application, right? There is a premium access to access not just Nigeria but other markets that we are in, right? So there is that. We also charge for our recommendation to to clubs and to agencies.
I'm curious, what does that look like?
What does that look like? So I want you to imagine that you are an agent right now, right? Well, so as an agent, you have contacts maybe in Europe, or you have like a requirement from a club that says they are looking for a striker who is like under the age of 19, right? And maybe good in the box, give you some requirements. So you give us that information, right? And we sift through our database and produce, a good list of them, right? So for that service, we charge.
So you're a programmer, you've been working in the tech industry for a while now, and I'm sure you're aware how lucrative scouting talent in the tech industry is, right? So across engineering, design, and operations, I know of agencies that are asking of up to 50% of your annual salary as placement commission. And so my question to you is, could AfriScout develop a similar model where you take a small percentage of every athlete contract?
No, at the moment, we do not have any direct agreement with the players at all, right? So, Afris, so, but something very key that we are seeing is we have players who are actually on Afri Scouts who come to look at their own data, right? Now, now, now get this. On Afri Scout, we allow you to create playlists. So, do you get what that means? Like you can join your highlights together. So we have media companies who do this, right? Because that's content. You want to create content. So we are having players themselves do this and even pay to do this.
Really, super, super interesting stuff.
Exactly. So I'm trying to open your mind to there are so many ways to spin this. So you can imagine having like thousands of African players, and they're all in there. And now we are speaking about building the local leagues, right? And as it becomes more popular, it has more fans who are looking for these players, right? So There are many ways to grow this just on the data side. And that's for B2C. And for B2B, it's just being that enterprise service that you can come to find the best from Africa. Instead of flying across 10 different countries, give us what you want and we use AI and go into our database and go into 10 different countries and give you what you want.
What kind of reception are you seeing with African leagues? Are they embracing the platform?
Yes, 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 they are.
In an interview, you mentioned building Afriskaut to become the networking hub for athletes, building a LinkedIn for athletes, so to say. Now, could you share more on that vision and how you plan on achieving that?
I think for us, there will be a point where these players or these athletes, as we grow into other sports, they are able to claim that page. Do you get that?
So like a profile.
Like a profile, yes.
To be sure I'm getting you right, agencies and clubs can come on the platform, build a profile, and start scouting, while players, on the other hand, are equally building a profile, but to try get scouted. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Interesting stuff. What advice do you have for founders with moonshot ideas? I describe a moonshot idea as one with huge upside, so in terms of market potential, but then it has just as many downsides. So for example, the need for regulation or the need for enterprise partnerships, etc. What advice would you give to those founders, especially in regards to forming partnerships with big players?
Think about how the other party can benefit every time. Every time. Always be constantly obsessed with how the customer or how the other partner would win. I think with that, everybody would want to listen to you.
From your experience, what are some other untapped opportunities in the sports or creative industry? Any specific gaps you're seeing?
Yes, no, there's a lot. The key one for me is fan engagement. I think right now the winner of fan engagement is betting companies, right? Because they are engaging the fans with betting, right? I'm seeing good players like FanBants. FanBants is a very good Nigerian company, right? No, it's not a betting platform, so to speak. It's like more of peer-to-peer type of thing, right? And it's fantasy gaming. It's fantasy gaming, basically, right? So I think we need more of that fan engagement. Streaming too is very good, streaming as well, but there needs to be an understanding to grow the league.
That's what you meant by streaming. It seems like the streaming space is dominated by veteran platforms.
Okay, so in regards to streaming, these local grassroots games or matches that we're speaking about, it's not particularly feasible for us to have state of the art or so many TV cameras in all of them, right? Right? But a good local league can build a proper brand for themselves in that area. Like maybe the best where you're from in Kenya, right? Or the smaller teams there, they just build a small following and they stream it on a platform where their fans can probably pay to watch it, right? So that's another way to monetize, right? And start engaging them from there. We have to do the work.
How much appetite is there for local sports in Africa?
At the moment, not much. And that's because we haven't given them a product yet.
What are some of the challenges African talent face when attempting to break into international leagues, and how is Afriskout helping to bridge that gap?
Trust, right? Trust. We still have a lot of distrust between these bigger clubs in Europe and African players. So we are trying to bridge this gap and basically improve the trust by providing performance data, providing bio data, accurate bio data that they can trust, and data in leagues that we are saying are the benchmark for talent in that country. Because they also have to trust the level that you're playing in. It's not enough that Gideon scored 10 goals. Who did you score 10 goals against?
Namdi, this has been an amazing conversation. It's been exciting to see Africa's potential through your perspective. One last question. Where can listeners find you online if they want to reach out or learn more?
LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, just my name, Nnamdi Emefo. You can just reach out on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Gideon, for having me. It's been amazing.